Now, let me coming back to this monopoly question. When you start, if you sort of think about the history of entrepreneurship and innovation over the last 250 years, people have really succeeded when two things have been true. When you start a business where you create something of value to the world and you capture some fraction of the value you create. So you create X dollars in value and you get Y% of X. So pretty straightforward math formula. But I think one of the things that people always get wrong is that X and Y are these totally independent variables. And so X can be very big and Y can be 0% a lot of the time. And I think it is, and I think one of the things that's both unusual about software and why sort of Silicon Valley is so incredibly dynamic right now and so successful is because in a lot of these software businesses, people are actually able to capture some decent fraction of the value of what they create. There are many other innovations where this was not the case. The airline industry in the U.S. over 100 years has basically made almost no money. It's been, it's good for society that we have airplanes, but you have about 180 billion a year in domestic ticket sales on airlines, 50 billion a year in search advertising on Google. So you'd say, if you measure it that way, say the airline industry is still more important than search on Google. We'd rather do without Google than without airplanes, probably, if you had to sort of pick between one or the other. But Google as a company is worth 6 times as much as all the airplane companies combined. And I think this, again, reflects this monopoly versus competition dynamic. And I think it is sort of this strange reality that an awful lot of scientists and inventors always have this fantasy that, of course, they're going to get rewarded massively for their inventions, but the somewhat disturbing history is that this has often not been the case. In the first industrial revolution in Britain, where you had the textile factories in the 18th and 19th century got started, it was a lot of innovation, a lot of improvements, but even in 1850, 1860, 100 years into the Industrial Revolution, the great fortunes in Britain were still all the landed aristocracy. The people who started the textile factories, the owners of them, made very little money because all the profits were competed away. They had failed to be differentiated enough. And so I think this is always something to think through really hard. And there is something about software that is so powerful today because it is really this exceptional industry in which the people who create things of value are able to capture some fraction of what they create. Now, a second somewhat contrarian answer to my question. People will always, when you hear this question, tell me something that's true that very few people agree with you on. People will sort of intuitively say, well, there aren't, we've already figured everything out. There are no answers to this, that everything's already understood. And I want to suggest that there are actually many answers left to this question. And I sort of suggest this three-part division into conventional truths, which everybody understands. So it's like 1 + 1 = 2. The Earth goes around the sun. These things are true. They're not terribly valuable. They don't give you any edge because they're already understood by everybody else in the world. There are mysteries, which are things that are impossible to figure out. But then I think in between conventions and mysteries, there are what I call secrets, things that are hard but possible to figure out. And if you work at them, you can figure them out. And it is my thesis that there are many secrets left to be discovered, that if we work at them, we can do them in many, many different areas. Now, there are certainly areas where everything has been discovered. So if you were like in the 18th century and you looked at a map, you could say, well, I don't really know what's at this part of the map, and you could become an explorer and you could find out. And that's not the case anymore today, since we've mapped the whole surface of the planet. There are no secrets left in geography. Or if you were in the 19th century and said, well, I want to become a chemist and discover some new elements, that probably would not be a good idea in the 21st century. So periodic table of elements, the map of the world, these are sort of complete. There are no secrets left there. But most subjects are not like geography or chemistry. Most subjects are still much more on the frontier, and they're ones where we can come up with many types of answers. And I think that I do think that one of the things that often is very is sort of this intuition that's very true in many of these companies is that people think that there's something they can figure out. If you think you can figure it out, you'll work really hard at it. So at PayPal, I thought there was some really interesting stuff we could figure out around digital currency and changing the nature of money. We actually didn't quite succeed in doing it. We didn't succeed in replacing the US dollar with a new world currency, which was our crazy goal in 2000. But that sort of deep substantive thinking about cryptocurrency helped inspire us to come up with an architecture for the system that turned out to make for a really good payment system in all these other ways. And so I think there are sort of a lot of these secrets left. One of the reasons that people are skeptical of secrets or of their ability to find them is they sort of look around, they think, you know, the world is flat, there's 7 billion other people on this planet, and so it's always either someone else will have figured it out already, or it's impossibly hard, and so I'm not going to be the one to figure this out. And obviously the sort of the paradox is that when everybody believes that to be true, then nobody is looking, and then if you become the one person who looks, you have a much better chance than you might think. And I think we are in this sort of strange world where people are very much believe in globalization. They very much believe in the flatness of the world, and so strangely, people are not trying very hard and looking for all these secrets, all these great new businesses that could be started.